You know how they say the most important moments in life happen when you least expect them? Well, let me tell you about the day I accidentally became Earth's ambassador of terror while trying to enjoy my morning coffee. I'm Dr. Morgan Fritz, and until 6 months ago, I was just your average veterinary epidemiologist at the CDC, spending my days tracking disease patterns and occasionally explaining to people why they shouldn't kiss raccoons. Then the Valaxians showed up and everything went sideways. Picture this. I'm sitting in the break room contemplating whether to microwave last night's leftover pad thai, when suddenly every screen in the building starts broadcasting the same message. "Greetings, Earth, we come in peace," followed by what looked like a PowerPoint presentation made by someone who just discovered clip art. The Valaxians, as we soon learned, were a highly advanced species that had been studying Earth from afar. They'd chosen to make first contact at the CDC because they were fascinated by how humans had survived on what they called the most aggressively hostile planet we've ever encountered. Their lead researcher, Ambassador Crix, looked like what you'd get if you crossed a praying mantis with a disco ball, all gleaming chitin and compound eyes, topped off with what they insisted was formal diplomatic attire but looked suspiciously like a Hawaiian shirt made of living crystals. "Dr. Fritz," Crix clicked, mandibles twitching in what I would later learn was their version of academic excitement. "Your species has survived multiple extinction events, countless pandemics, and regular attacks from organisms ranging from microscopic to megafauna. Yet you continue to not only persist, but thrive. Most impressive." I shrugged, trying to act like this was a totally normal Tuesday. "Yeah, well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?" That's when things started going downhill. Crix's crystalline shirt began pulsing with what I can only describe as smug bioluminescence. But surely nothing on Earth could compare to the apex predators of the greater galactic community. We've studied your planet's wildlife extensively, and while charming, they're rather primitive by our standards. Now, I don't know if it was the sleep deprivation, the cold coffee, or just good old-fashioned human spite, but something in me snapped. Here was this glittery bug person, basically calling Earth's entire biosphere a petting zoo. "Really?" I said, setting down my coffee cup with what I hoped was dramatic flair. "Tell me, Ambassador Crix, what's the most dangerous organism in your federation?" Looking back, I probably should have kept my mouth shut, but you know what they say about hindsight and all that. Besides, how was I supposed to know that my impromptu lesson about one of Earth's most terrifying viruses would end up causing a galactic incident? Ambassador Crix's response was to summon what they called their ultimate specimen database, which turned out to be a holographic projector that made my phone's camera quality look like a potato. With a wave of their crystalline-encrusted appendage, they projected the image of what looked like a cross between a velociraptor and a Venus flytrap. "Behold," Crix announced with all the dramatic flair of a game show host, "the Nexus beast of Proxima Centauri b, the most lethal predator in the known galaxy." I'll admit it looked impressive, 3 rows of razor-sharp teeth, acid-secreting claws, and apparently some kind of psychic ability to sense fear. The assembled CDC staff oohed and ahed appropriately, while I fought the urge to roll my eyes. "That's cute," I said, pulling up our database, "but let me tell you about something that makes your space dinosaur look like a labradoodle." One of Crix's junior researchers, a shorter version of the ambassador, who I'd mentally nicknamed Tiny Tim, leaned forward. "Impossible! The Nexus beast has decimated entire colonies." I nodded, typing away. "And how exactly does it kill its prey?" "It hunts them down and devours them whole," Crix declared proudly. "Quick death, then? Victim doesn't suffer?" I asked, trying not to smile. "Of course, the Nexus beast is efficiency personified. That's when I knew I had them. Well then, let me introduce you to something we call Rabies lyssavirus. Unlike your mercy-killing space dinosaur, this little troublemaker takes its time. And the best part? It's invisible to the naked eye." The entire alien delegation shifted uncomfortably. I could practically see their superiority complex starting to crack. Tiny Tim's antennae drooped visibly. But size equals threat level. This is basic xenobiology," Crix protested, their bioluminescent shirt now pulsing in what I assumed was distress. "Oh, my sweet summer alien," I said, pulling up the first slide of what would become the most terrifying PowerPoint presentation in galactic history. "Let me tell you about the concept of viruses, and specifically about one that turns its victims into aggressive, hydrophobic zombies before killing them with a near 100% fatality rate." "Hydrophobic zombies?" Tiny Tim squeaked. "That's right," I grinned, channeling my inner horror movie narrator. "And the best part? It's been haunting Earth's mammals for at least 3,000 years. We've just learned to live with it." The room fell silent except for the soft whirring of the holographic projector, still displaying its now decidedly less impressive Nexus beast. Crix's mandibles twitched rapidly, and their shirt had dimmed to a concerning shade of puce. You live with this creature voluntarily?" another alien researcher asked, their voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, honey," I said, clicking to the next slide. "We haven't even gotten to the good part yet." I've given plenty of presentations in my career, but none quite as satisfying as watching a room full of allegedly superior alien beings slowly lose their collective minds over rabies. My audience had grown from the initial delegation to include several hastily summoned xenobiologists and what appeared to be their equivalent of a CDC team. "So," I began, pulling up an electron microscope image of the virus, "this lovely bullet-shaped particle is what we're dealing with. Small enough to hide in a drop of saliva, smart enough to use your own nervous system as its personal highway to your brain." Tiny Tim's antennae were now coiled so tightly they resembled spring rolls. But how does it transfer between hosts?" "Funny you should ask," I said, advancing to a particularly graphic slide of a rabid fox. "It hijacks the host's behavior, making them extremely aggressive. They attack anything that moves, spreading the virus through bites, and here's the really fun part: by the time you show symptoms, it's already too late." "Too late?" Crix's crystalline shirt had gone completely dark. "What do you mean, too late? Once symptoms appear, death is almost certain. We're talking 99.9999% fatal. Makes your Nexus beast's kill rate look like amateur hour, doesn't it?" One of the alien scientists raised a trembling appendage. "Surely you have developed countermeasures?" "Oh, we have vaccines and treatments, but they only work if you get them before symptoms start. Once the virus reaches your brain—" I made a popping sound with my mouth, causing several aliens to flinch. "Game over." "But the symptoms?" another alien interrupted, their voice oddly hopeful. "Surely they cannot be worse than being devoured by a Nexus beast?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Let me tell you about hydrophobia. Imagine being so terrified of water that you can't even swallow your own saliva. Your throat seizes up at the mere sight of liquid. You're desperately thirsty, but your body physically won't let you drink. Meanwhile, you're running a high fever, becoming increasingly confused and aggressive, and experiencing painful muscle spasms." The room had gone so quiet you could hear the coffee maker burbling in the break room next door. I pressed on, warming to my subject. "But wait, there's more. The virus doesn't just kill you, it fundamentally changes who you are. Gentle people become violent. Rational thinking goes out the window. You might try to bite your loved ones, not because you want to, but because the virus is literally rewiring your brain to spread itself." "This is barbaric," Crix exclaimed, their mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. "How do your people cope with such a threat?" "Cope?" I grinned. "Oh, we've turned it into horror movies, Halloween costumes, and public health campaigns. There's probably a rabies virus plushie in the CDC gift shop." That was apparently too much for one of the junior researchers who had to be escorted out of the room. I could hear them hyperventilating in the hallway, their crystalline accessories tinkling like wind chimes in a panic. "But surely," Tiny Tim ventured, "this virus only affects one or two species." I smiled the smile of someone about to deliver the coup de grace. "You know what? Let me show you our transmission chart. It's quite impressive, really. We've documented cases in pretty much every terrestrial mammal species: dogs, cats, bats, foxes, raccoons, skunks, even the occasional human. It's remarkably egalitarian that way." The holoprojector showing the Nexus beast flickered and died, as if even it couldn't compete with nature's perfect killing machine. Ambassador Crix's mighty ego seemed to deflate with it. "Dr. Fritz," they said, their voice barely above a whisper, "are you telling me that your species developed spacefaring civilization while sharing your planet with an invisible, brain-hijacking death virus?" "Oh, Ambassador," I replied, saving my presentation for posterity, "we developed civilization while sharing our planet with hundreds of invisible death machines. Rabies is just one of my personal favorites." The next hour turned into what I can only describe as a cosmic horror show, with me playing the role of eldritch truth revealer. Every answer I gave seemed to horrify our galactic visitors more than the last. "But you mentioned vaccines," one of their medical officers said, clinging to hope like a drowning man to driftwood. "Surely you've eliminated this threat from most populated areas." "Well, that's a funny story, actually," I replied, pulling up a global distribution map. "See all these coloured regions? Active rabies zones, and the blank spaces? That's mostly ocean, where coincidentally rabies can't survive, though there was that one case with a seal." "A seal?" Tiny Tim's voice had risen several octaves. "It can cross between land and marine mammals?" "Oh yeah, rabies isn't picky. If it's warm-blooded and has a nervous system, it's fair game. Though to be fair, seal rabies is pretty rare. Now, bat rabies on the other hand." The mere mention of flying rabies vectors sent another alien researcher scurrying from the room. I could hear them in the hallway frantically communicating with what sounded like their version of a hazmat team. "How—" Crix began, then had to reset their vocal synthesizer. "How long has your species coexisted with this pathogen?" "Written records go back about 4,000 years, I said, warming to the historical angle. "Ancient Mesopotamians described it in their medical texts. The Greeks wrote about it. Every civilization that's ever had dogs has had to deal with rabies. There's even evidence suggesting it may have influenced vampire and werewolf legends." 4,000 years? Crix's crystalline shirt had begun to develop stress fractures. "Give or take. Though the virus itself is probably much older, it's had plenty of time to perfect its technique. Did you know it can actually lie dormant in your nervous system for months before showing symptoms? There are documented cases of year-long incubation periods. That revelation caused a ripple of what I assume was terror through the alien delegation. Their translucent exoskeletons had taken on a distinctly greenish tinge. But the most fascinating part," I continued, really hitting my stride now, "is how it changes behavior. We still don't fully understand all the mechanisms, but somehow this microscopic particle can turn the most gentle creatures into aggressive vectors for its own spread. It's like a programmer rewriting software, except the software is your brain." "And you've never managed to eradicate it?" one of their epidemiologists asked, their voice trembling. "Oh, we've tried, but here's the thing about rabies. It's got what we call a wide-host reservoir. Even if we eliminated it from every dog on Earth, it would still persist in wild populations. Bats, foxes, raccoons, and those are just the common vectors. We once found it in a mountain goat at 15,000 feet elevation." The alien epidemiologist made us sound like a modem having an existential crisis. "But don't worry," I added cheerfully. "Most humans these days don't have to think about it too much. Unless you're in veterinary medicine, work with wildlife, or live in certain rural areas, or travel to regions without good vaccine access, or encounter unfamiliar animals, or—" No, I probably should have stopped there, but you know how it is when you're really passionate about your subject matter. I was just getting to the part about how rabies can affect brain chemistry differently in different species when I noticed Crix's shirt had completely shattered. I'd like to say that what happened next was all part of my master plan to establish humanity's badass credentials in the galactic community. But honestly, I just got carried away with my favorite topic. How was I supposed to know that the Valaxian species had some kind of racial memory that made them particularly susceptible to horror stories about neural parasites? Within hours of my presentation, the alien delegation had implemented what they called maximum biological containment protocols. In practice, this meant that every single one of them was now wearing what looked like a disco ball had eaten a hazmat suit and sprouted legs. "Dr. Fritz," Crix announced through their quadruple-filtered breathing apparatus, "we've just received word from the Galactic Council. Earth has been officially classified as a Class X death world." "Is that bad?" I asked, trying not to laugh at the way their protective crystalline coating caught the fluorescent lights and turned the CDC hallway into an impromptu rave. "It's the highest threat classification in known space," Tiny Tim whispered from inside their own sparkly containment suit. "Previously it was reserved for planets actively experiencing supernova events." Word of my presentation spread through the alien communication networks faster than, well, a virus. Within days, every extraterrestrial embassy on Earth had implemented their own version of biological containment. The Andromedans wrapped themselves in force fields. The Centaurians refused to leave their ships without robot proxies. The Proxima colony actually recalled their entire diplomatic corps and nuked their Earth contact uniforms from orbit, just to be safe. I became known in alien diplomatic circles as the Harbinger of Terror, which honestly looked great on my resume. My inbox was flooded with messages from various species, all essentially asking the same thing. How do you sleep at night knowing that exists? The Galactic Council held an emergency session to debate proper containment protocols for Earth. Their suggestion that we might want to consider relocating to a safer planet was met with widespread human amusement, especially when we pointed out that we'd probably bring the rabies with us anyway, along with our pets and our wildlife, and all the other lovely little pathogens we'd evolved alongside. The final straw came when someone, I swear it wasn't me, mentioned that rabies was just one of many neurotropic viruses on Earth. The footage of that council session, with various alien species learning about prions, brain-eating amoebae, and zombie ant fungi, went viral on both human and alien social media. "Your species," Crix told me during one of our now daily briefing sessions, their voice distorted through multiple layers of protection, "is clearly either insane or invincible. We haven't decided which is more terrifying." "Why not both?" I suggested, cheerfully sipping my coffee through a straw they'd insisted on providing. Apparently, the sight of humans casually ingesting liquids now triggered their equivalent of a panic attack. 6 months after what became known as the Rabies incident, I've learned that fame in the galactic community is a double-edged sword. On one hand, I'm now the most sought-after speaker at interstellar scientific conferences. On the other hand, I can't so much as clear my throat in a crowded spaceport without causing a minor evacuation. The galactic community's approach to Earth has undergone what diplomatic historians are calling a significant readjustment, which is a polite way of saying they now treat us like a planet full of immortal battle demons who juggle plague vials for fun. Every human spacecraft automatically gets a safety buffer zone in alien ports, not because they're required to, but because other species' ships literally drift away from us, like we're wearing cosmic reverse magnetism. The really funny part, this has somehow made us more popular. Turns out, nothing draws a crowd quite like potentially lethal danger. Earth has become the galaxy's equivalent of that one friend everyone's slightly afraid of but desperately wants at their parties. You know, the one who shows up with questionable homemade moonshine and stories that start with, "Y'all won't believe this." The Valaxians, to their credit, have turned their initial terror into something approaching scientific fascination. They've established the galaxy's first Institute for Terrestrial Pathogen Studies, though they insist on running it from a space station at a safe distance of several million miles from Earth. The station's design is fascinating. It looks like someone threw a medical research facility, a military bunker, and a disco ball into a teleporter malfunction. They've got more containment protocols than a CDC cleanroom during flu season. My unexpected promotion to Interspecies Disease Education Officer came with an office on the station. The Valaxians insisted, something about keeping potential pathogen vectors separated from the general population. I'm pretty sure they sanitize my office with plasma bursts when I'm not there. The nameplate on my door changes color based on how recently I've been in contact with Earth's surface. Currently, it's glowing a concerning shade of purple. The job itself is surprisingly fun once you get used to giving lectures to auditoriums full of hazmat-suited aliens. I've developed quite a following among xenobiologists and what passes for horror enthusiasts in alien culture. My presentation on tick life cycles has been classified as a psychological weapon in 3-star systems. Crick's now sporting a reinforced crystalline shirt that's supposedly rated for nuclear explosions, has become my most dedicated student. They've even started making jokes about their initial reaction, though they still won't come within 10 feet of any terrestrial mammals. Last week they managed to watch an entire video about mosquito-borne diseases without their exoskeleton changing color. I'm calling that progress. You know what the really hilarious part is? They told me during our last meeting, safely separated by 3 layers of quarantine fields. We originally came to Earth looking for military allies against the Borgavian Empire. We thought your species' survival capabilities might make you useful in a fight. Now the Borgavians won't even enter your solar system without signing 3 different quarantine waivers. Psychological warfare at its finest, I agreed, deliberately taking a sip of water just to watch their containment suits' filters kick into overdrive. Though I still haven't told them about prion diseases yet. The mere mention of prions sent Tiny Tim, who's become my unofficial alien teaching assistant, into a frenzy of warning signals. Their antennae, which had finally started to uncurl after months of therapy, immediately wound themselves into protective spirals. Please, Dr. Fritz. They're still processing the concept of arthropod-borne viruses. Let's save the protein misfolding horrors for next semester. The greatest irony. The Nexus beast has been officially declassified as a Class A threat. Apparently, after learning about Earth's microscopic terrors, none of the alien species can take it seriously anymore. Last I heard, they're turning its habitat into a petting zoo. The gift shop sells plushies and t-shirts with slogans like, "I survived the galaxy's former top predator." The beast itself seems deeply confused about its demotion in the galactic fear hierarchy. But it's not all fun and games. My position has actually led to some genuine breakthroughs in interspecies medical cooperation. Once the initial panic wore off, several alien species became intensely interested in how humans had managed to develop medical countermeasures against various pathogens. Our vaccine technology, while primitive by their standards, approaches the problem from angles they'd never considered. The Arcturians, for example, were particularly impressed by the concept of controlled exposure to develop immunity. Their entire medical philosophy had been based on isolation and avoidance. The idea that you could deliberately introduce a weakened pathogen to strengthen biological defenses blew their multiple minds, though they insisted on testing the concept using robot proxies for the first few years. Even the Valaxians have started to adapt, albeit slowly. They've developed new medical technologies based on studying Earth's pathogen-host relationships. Their latest breakthrough in neural protection was inspired by how mammals' blood-brain barrier keeps most pathogens out, though they're quick to point out that rabies' ability to bypass this defense still gives them nightmares. The human diplomatic corps has had to adapt as well. Every Earth embassy now comes equipped with extensive decontamination facilities, and what amounts to a small hospital's worth of diagnostic equipment. Not because we need it, but because other species won't enter our diplomatic compounds without multiple layers of medical screening. On the plus side, this means human diplomats haven't had to worry about catching alien diseases. On the minus side, getting anything signed in person takes about 6 hours longer than it should. My personal favorite development has been the creation of new interspecies health and safety protocols. I spent 3 weeks helping draft the Guidelines for Safe Interaction with Terrestrial Biological Entities. The final document is longer than most novels and includes such gems as maintain minimum safe distance of 50 meters from any unneutered Earth mammal and Under no circumstances attempt to pet anything with fur, scales, feathers, or visible mucous membranes. The Galactic Council holds monthly meetings to update their Earth containment protocols, though these days they're more a formality than anything else. Last session's big debate was whether to reclassify human laughter as a potential biohazard warning sign. Apparently, some species have noticed that humans tend to laugh more when we're about to share particularly disturbing medical facts. Crix, showing remarkable personal growth, has recently begun studying terrestrial epidemiology. They still wear their reinforced containment suit, but they've added decorative patches showing various Earth pathogens viewed under electron microscope. The Rabies virus patch is positioned right over their primary heart, either as a sign of respect or a reminder of their first brush with Earth's microscopic horrors. You know, they told me yesterday while we were reviewing footage of fungal infections for next week's lecture, I used to think my species was advanced because we'd eliminated all our dangerous pathogens. Now I wonder if we didn't make ourselves weaker in the process. That's surprisingly philosophical coming from someone wearing 3 layers of biocontainment gear, I noted. Yes, well, they adjusted their crystalline collar, which now sports a small hologram of a bacteriophage. One can appreciate the elegant horror of evolution while still maintaining reasonable safety precautions. The comment made me smile. For all their initial panic, the aliens are starting to understand something fundamental about life on Earth. It's not just about survival, but adaptation. We humans didn't become what we are by avoiding dangers, but by learning to live with them, understand them, and sometimes even turn them to our advantage. As for me, I've learned some valuable lessons about interspecies communication and the importance of knowing your audience. Though I still maintain that my presentation was significantly less traumatic than the time my colleague Dr. Peterson tried to explain tick reproduction to the Arcturian delegation. They're still in therapy for that one. But that's another story entirely. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for tomorrow's lecture on cordyceps fungi. The Valaxians have specifically requested that I include the zombie ant footage, though they insist on viewing it from behind blast shields. They've also asked me to warn them before showing any time-lapse videos of fungal growth. Apparently, the last presentation caused 3 molt cycles worth of stress shedding. You know what the best part is? Next semester I get to teach them about what lives in the deep ocean. I haven't told them about immortal jellyfish or extremophile bacteria yet. I figure we'll work up to that slowly. After all, you can't rush quality entertainment. I love my job, even if my office door now comes with a decontamination airlock and a warning sign in 17 different languages. The sign reads, "Caution, terrestrial biological entity beyond this point. Enter at own risk. Management not responsible for existential crises resulting from casual conversation about Earth's ecosystem." Tiny Tim added a postscript last week warning, "Subject prone to enthusiastic lectures about microscopic horror. Psychological support available upon request. I'm thinking of having it framed."